The Chernobyl nuclear disaster, which occurred on April 26, 1986, remains one of the most devastating tragedies of the 20th century. Located in northern Ukraine, then part of the Soviet Union, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant consisted of 4 reactors, with reactor number 4 at the center of the explosion that released a massive amount of radiation into the atmosphere. The catastrophe was not just a technical accident but also a landmark that exposed the deep flaws of a political and security system. On that fateful night, a series of human errors and mechanical failures culminated in a catastrophic explosion. Radioactive clouds spread across several European countries, contaminating millions of people and territories. The impact was immediate, the radiation levels around the plant became lethal, and the Soviet government faced the difficult task of managing an unprecedented crisis from both a human and environmental perspective. This event forever changed the way the world viewed nuclear energy and its implications. In the following chapters, we will explore the causes, consequences, and lasting legacy of Chernobyl, unraveling its political, social, and environmental ramifications. To fully understand the Chernobyl disaster, it is essential to place it in the context of the Soviet Union in the 1980s. The USSR was at the height of a period of stagnation under the leadership of Mikhail Gorbachev, who had taken power in 1985. However, before his reforms, the Soviet government was characterized by strict state control, a culture of secrecy, and an aversion to transparency. These characteristics, deeply ingrained in the political system of the time, played a significant role in the mismanagement of the disaster. Furthermore, the disaster occurred during the Cold War, a period marked by intense rivalry between the two global superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. The arms race and the obsession with demonstrating technological and military power directly influenced the political and technical decisions surrounding the construction of the Chernobyl nuclear plant. In pursuit of rapid, unprecedented advances in nuclear energy, the Soviet government prioritized performance over safety. In this context, Chernobyl became a symbol of the structural flaws of a political system that prioritized hiding problems rather than taking proactive measures. Fearing international repercussions, Soviet authorities initially downplayed the severity of the accident and delayed communication with both the international community and their own population. This political environment contributed to the lack of proper oversight, leading to technical failures and disastrous management in the wake of the explosion. Chernobyl was more than a technical failure, it was a reflection of a system under pressure, whose weaknesses were revealed to the world. This political backdrop is crucial to understanding how the accident occurred and how it was mismanaged. The Chernobyl nuclear plant was conceived as part of the Soviet plan to expand its energy capacity. Opened in 1977, the plant used a specific type of reactor known as RBMK, Reactor Bolshoi Mощnosti Kanalny, designed to generate large amounts of energy at relatively low cost. However, the RBMK reactor had design flaws that made it inherently unstable, especially under improper operating conditions. The plant's construction was marked by haste and a lack of thorough oversight, a consequence of the Soviet political system, which prioritized rapid results over safety. The RBMK reactor, in particular, had 2 critical problems: instability at low power levels and the lack of an effective containment system, which was common in other nuclear reactors around the world. At Chernobyl, there was no reinforced concrete structure capable of containing a possible explosion, which proved fatal during the disaster. Another crucial factor was the neglect of regular maintenance and technological updates. Inadequate quality control, combined with pressure for results, led to a series of compromises that weakened the plant's safety. The operators, many of whom lacked proper training, were used to a work environment where failures were often covered up or minimized, creating a culture of complacency. These deficiencies became evident on the night of the disaster. A poorly conducted safety test, combined with the reactor's unsafe design, triggered the chain of events that led to the explosion of Reactor 4. Thus, the flaws in the RBMK's design and the plant's management set the stage for the disaster that followed. On the night of April 25 to 26, 1986, Reactor 4 at the Chernobyl plant was the site of a safety test that quickly turned into an unprecedented tragedy. The engineering team aimed to test whether, in the event of a power failure, the emergency systems would be able to provide sufficient cooling to the reactor until backup generators could take over. However, what was supposed to be a controlled exercise turned into a disaster due to a combination of human errors and reactor design flaws. At 1:23 a.m., the operators drastically reduced the reactor's power, a risky maneuver that caused the RBMK reactor to enter an unstable zone. The safety system was partially turned off to conduct the test, and due to inexperience and inadequate training, the engineers failed to control the chain reaction occurring in the reactor core. A series of internal explosions culminated in the reactor's explosion, which released tons of radioactive material into the atmosphere. The first explosion destroyed the reactor's internal structure, releasing radiation vapors. The second explosion was even more devastating, hurling the reactor's heavy lid and scattering extremely radioactive nuclear fuel and graphite around the site. The ensuing fire worsened the situation, releasing even more radiation into the atmosphere, with winds spreading radioactive material across various European countries. The plant workers and Pripyat firefighters were the first to respond to the incident, unaware of the level of radiation they were exposed to. Many of these rescuers and operators died within days due to acute radiation exposure. Desperate attempts to control the fire and explosion failed, and radiation levels rendered the area around the plant uninhabitable. Meanwhile, Soviet authorities, still withholding the disaster from the world, struggled to grasp the scale of the catastrophe. Chernobyl had already become the worst nuclear accident in history, with devastating implications for people and the environment that would be felt for decades. The first hours after the disaster were marked by uncertainty, misinformation, and a slow response from the Soviet government. Despite the magnitude of the accident, local and national authorities hesitated to act decisively, concerned about the political repercussions and the Soviet Union's image in the world. The city of Pripyat, located just 3 kilometers from the plant, was not evacuated for almost 36 hours after the explosion, exposing about 49,000 residents to dangerously high levels of radiation. Initially, plant authorities downplayed the severity of the situation. The Soviet government, aware of the growing crisis, was reluctant to admit the extent of the disaster, both internally and to the international community. Only when radiation monitoring stations in Sweden detected abnormally high levels of radiation, pressuring Moscow, did the Soviet Union publicly acknowledge the incident 2 days after it occurred. This delay in recognizing the gravity of the accident had fatal consequences. Rescuers and the population of Pripyat were not properly informed of the risks, and protective measures were implemented too late. By the time evacuation was finally ordered on April 27, radiation had already infiltrated bodies, clothes, and even vegetation, contaminating everything and everyone. This slow reaction and the government's reluctance to admit the extent of the disaster highlight one of the main failures in Chernobyl's management: the lack of transparency and the prioritization of political propaganda over public safety. The severity of the incident would only be recognized internationally days later, by which time the catastrophe had already caused irreversible damage. The immediate effects of the Chernobyl explosion were catastrophic for both human health and the environment. The first to suffer the consequences were the plant workers and rescuers, many of whom were exposed to extremely high levels of radiation without any adequate protection. Radiation caused severe burns, acute illnesses, and, in many cases, death within days or weeks. Acute radiation syndrome, ARS, a condition caused by intense radiation exposure, quickly claimed the lives of the first firefighters and workers. In total, it is estimated that about 30 people died in the weeks following the accident, but the real numbers are difficult to calculate, as many of those exposed suffered long-term consequences that would take years to manifest. The environmental impact was equally devastating. The released radiation contaminated soil, water, and vegetation over a vast area around the plant. The Red Forest, located near Chernobyl, acquired its name due to the reddish coloration the trees took on after being exposed to high doses of radiation. This area, one of the most contaminated in the world, became uninhabitable for humans and devastating for local flora and fauna. Additionally, radioactive clouds spread across several European countries, severely affecting parts of Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. In the following days and weeks, radioactive particles moved with the wind, reaching even distant regions of Western Europe, raising concerns about food contamination and increased cases of cancer and other diseases. The consequences of Chernobyl continued to unfold long after the immediate crisis ended. In terms of health, the long-term impacts are still being studied, but the increase in thyroid cancer cases, particularly among children exposed to radiation, is one of the most visible marks of the disaster. It is estimated that thousands of cancer cases can be attributed to radiation exposure released by Reactor 4. Beyond health problems, the social repercussions were immense. Approximately 350,000 people were displaced from their homes in highly contaminated areas of Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. The evacuated towns and villages, including Pripyat, remain ghost towns to this day, symbolizing Chernobyl's lasting impact. Many of those who survived the disaster suffer from psychological trauma, chronic health issues, and social stigmatization. Environmentally, the area around the plant, known as the exclusion zone, has become one of the most radioactive regions on the planet. Although nature has somewhat begun to recover over time, the presence of radiation at elevated levels makes the region uninhabitable for humans for centuries. Curiously, the absence of human activity in the exclusion zone has allowed for the emergence of a diverse and unexpected fauna, with species such as wolves, lynxes, and bison returning to the area. After the disaster, the need to contain the radiation still emanating from Reactor 4 became an urgent priority. In the months following the explosion, a concrete structure, known as the sarcophagus, was built to cover the destroyed reactor and prevent more radiation from being released. However, this structure was temporary and began to deteriorate over the years. In 2016, a new sarcophagus, officially called the New Safe Confinement, was installed over the reactor. This gigantic steel structure, considered the largest movable structure in the world, was designed to last at least 100 years and seal the radiation still present in Reactor 4. The new sarcophagus is a monumental engineering feat and was an international effort, funded by donations from several countries and overseen by Ukraine. Although this new cover represents an important step in containing radiation, the problem of Chernobyl is far from resolved. The radioactive material inside Reactor 4 still needs to be dismantled and treated, a process that will take decades. The area around the plant continues to be closely monitored, and contamination of the region still presents immense challenges for the future. The Chernobyl disaster left a profound mark not only in the scientific and political fields but also in popular culture. Over the years, the tragedy has been the subject of numerous documentaries, books, films, and TV series, with HBO's 2019 miniseries being one of the most notable examples. The series brought the disaster to a new generation, faithfully recreating the events and moral dilemmas surrounding the accident. Additionally, Chernobyl has become a symbol of the struggle between truth and lies, where the failures of a closed political system, unable to deal with transparency, culminated in a catastrophe. Today, the site of the tragedy attracts dark tourism, with thousands of people visiting the exclusion zone to witness the place where history was marked in such a tragic way. In collective memory, Chernobyl is a constant reminder of the dangers of poorly managed nuclear energy and the price humanity pays when the pursuit of power outweighs the safety and well-being of people. The accident forever transformed the debate on nuclear energy and remains a dark milestone in modern history. The Chernobyl disaster left a legacy of important lessons that shaped the future of nuclear energy and the way the world deals with technological and environmental crises. The main lesson learned was the importance of transparency, safety, and strict regulation in any nuclear program. After Chernobyl, many countries revised their nuclear policies and adopted stricter safety standards. The tragedy also highlighted the danger of politicizing science and technology, demonstrating the human cost when critical decisions are made based on political interests rather than technical and scientific evidence. At the same time, the catastrophe also sparked a debate about the future of nuclear energy in the context of climate change. While many continue to view it as a dangerous energy source, others argue that, with proper precautions, it can be an effective solution for energy transition. What is undeniable is that Chernobyl serves as a constant warning of what can happen when we neglect safety in favor of other priorities. Its legacy will last for centuries, but the lessons learned have the potential to protect future generations from repeating the same mistakes.